Hey guys, Bridget and I just finished processing our Highland Bull, butchering them. So I'm going to share with you some of the stuff we learned during that process. So we've done pigs before, chickens, deer, pretty straightforward and easy. But a cow is a lot different. It's a much bigger animal. So if you have friends that can help, call them up, plan a weekend or 2 weekends, and get them to come and help. We were able to do it with the two of us, but if we had help, it would have made the process so much easier. So one of the things that made a difference in our processing is we originally had the small meat grinder, and we were able to basically get a used commercial meat grinder. You can tell here the difference in how fast and how much meat that'll process. So it really made a big difference having this unit for doing something like a cow. Make sure your hoist is tall enough to actually get the cow off the ground. We had used this one here, which is attached to our pole barn car shelter. However, what we should have done is put that chain up a little higher. It was still too low with our gambrel and hoist, and we couldn't lift the cow entirely off the ground. These are some other items here that made life really easy for processing our cow. When we were doing pigs and chickens last year, the year before, we had borrowed another vacuum sealer, and we actually had to wait in between times when we could seal the bags. So we actually kind of got backed up waiting for the unit to cool down. So we purchased basically a Pro Series vacuum sealer, and we had no problem doing a cow. We didn't have to wait for the unit to cool down. We just kept going, processing everything that we needed to. Good stainless steel meat hooks made all the difference down in our cool cellar, just to be able to hang the meat and let it age. Good boning knife. Again, it made a difference in being able to cut easily. It sharpened nicely. It was able to do all the work we needed it to do. We actually broke down and spent money on a good bone saw. Last year when we did the pigs, we used a regular hacksaw that we got from the hardware store. And I think the difference was like the hacksaw was $24 and this boning saw was, I think, like $120. But the big difference is the length on it. It makes it so much easier to do like big chunks of ribs, that sort of thing. And the blade itself is specific to meat, or not to meat, to bone. So it makes a huge difference cutting through that bone quickly and efficiently. So we have our John Deere 2032R, which has a great bucket on it, and we're able to move the cow around quite a bit. But the only thing is, even with the bucket, it doesn't lift the cow up high enough either to be able to get it fully off the ground. So making sure you're able to get that cow fully off the ground makes a huge difference in being able to process it properly. So this is kind of some of the things that weren't as useful as we thought they were. And I've included the bone saw as well. So when we did our cow this year, we didn't cut that many pieces with bone in it. We did ours basically all boneless. So in cutting basically your New York steaks and your bone-in steaks and your tomahawk and doing your ribs and all that sort of stuff, you need the saw to be able to cut that sort of, those pieces of meat. We didn't do that, so we didn't use that boning saw as much as we actually thought we would. Bone dust scraper. Seeing as that we didn't do that many cuts of meat with the bone in, this really didn't come in handy at all. The meat hook. I actually didn't use it. I bought it and I didn't use it. what I see a lot of guys doing is being able to use it to pull meat apart when they're cutting, or especially on the membrane on the ribs to get that membrane off. Since we didn't do any cuts or ribs, we actually removed that membrane with a knife when we went in between the ribs to remove the meat. So I got it, but it didn't get used at all. The good thing with those two is they didn't cost that much, so they're handy to have. Another thing I didn't like at all is these bags that are pleated. They're really good for doing like big chickens, if you do whole chickens, or you know, the femur bone in the cow or something like that. But it's just so hard to get a good seal once you stick something in, and you've got to get those pleats lined up again and nicely on the sealing machine, that I find them to be a pain in the butt. So this is the hoist and gambrel we used, and it's basically a commercial off-the-shelf one for hunters for hanging up their deer, and it worked great except for the fact that cows are a lot heavier than deer. So those two pulleys really worked hard to be able to lift the deer or the cow up off the ground. And the rope that's on it it's kind of thin and slippery. So doing a deer is no problem, doing pigs is no problem, but lifting a cow up off the ground, it takes a lot more work and energy to get it up there. And that rope that's on it made it a little tougher, being a little slippery and thin. So when you go to butcher your Highland cow, what I recommend is do not do it in the spring. The big reason for us to do it in the spring was just due to timing, and we wanted to get it done, have the meat in the freezer ready to go for basically the rest of the year. However, what we found is because Highlands grow a winter coat, they also shed that winter coat in the spring. So that shedding in the spring made it very hard for us to keep everything hair-free when we were butchering and slaughtering the cow. We were getting hair all over the legs, and hair was kind of falling out. So even if you cut properly with the knife from underneath, you know, you'd still be putting hair all over everything. And trying to wash off big long chunks of hair, it was not coming off that well. So if you can do it in the fall when they're starting to grow their winter coat and getting their winter coat, I'd highly recommend that over doing it in the spring. So with the meat saw as well, even though it was a good investment for doing the meat, or doing the cutting the bones, and the fact that we didn't use it, I think it was still a good investment, especially going forward. We'll probably do some more cuts with the bone in. But what I'd recommend too is if you can borrow one of those meat band saws or find a cheap one, pick it up, because it would make your life so much easier doing a cow. So guys, with a Highland, one of the things you actually want too from being able to harvest them is the skull. So shot placement for us was kind of key, and I did it right here kind of in the woods, and there's a gate, a wire gate right here, so it was easy to get him out once I shot him. And how I did it, I was thinking for a month at least, different ways and techniques in that. One of the most common is a shot placement, basically top of the head, you draw a line between the ears and eyes, and you put it right there. That's how we do it with the pigs, and it works really well. But again, I didn't know how much damage that would do to the skull, and I wanted to be sure that when I put him down, he was going down, and it was going to be as quick and as humane as possible. So I didn't really like that shot placement. I didn't know whether to use 223, 308, 12 gauge slug, what kind of damage it would do to the skull, if it was going to penetrate the skull, if it was going to put them down instantly. With the pigs, when we use the 22 and it penetrates the skull there, but the nerves are still going afterwards. So the pig is still shaking a bit. So jumping on them and basically cutting the arteries in the throat are a big part of making sure the pig is finished. A Highland cow, I cannot jump on the head to try and hold them down to sever the arteries. So for me, that was still a debate in my head. I heard other people suggest basically going in through the ear at a 45-degree angle with a 223. Again, I didn't know how much damage that would do to the skull. I didn't know if that would put them down instantly. Again, with a cow, a Highland cow, especially with the horns, and if they're moving around after the shot, you're not jumping on them. So what I ended up doing is T-Bone liked to come and lay along the southern side of the field here, and he would come sun himself and just lay down. So for me, it kind of made sense to be able to do it while he's already down instead of standing. So he's not going to jump, he's not going to fall into a fence or into the tractor or into a pen or something where we've got him contained. So when I took the shot, I used the 12 gauge slug, and I basically walked up calmly behind him and put it basically on the back of his neck, right at the base of the skull. So basically it was a central nervous system shot. It basically severed the spine and destroyed the nervous system right there. So he basically had his head up a bit and his head dropped to the ground. There was nothing after that. He was finished. He was done. There was no flopping around. There was no flailing. It was about as quick and humane as I've ever seen. So I was really happy with the way that went, and if you're able to do that, I highly recommend that method. So while I was out here, I came to the back to see the shelter that the boys made, and they got all excited and inspired by seeing what the survival course did with the other huts and that sort of stuff. So they came back and built their own. So thanks guys for checking the video out. I hope you found it useful and learned a few things, and hopefully it'll make your process easier when it comes to butchering your Highland or just any other cow. So thanks again for checking us out, guys. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. Get down there, hit that little dingly bell, and we'll talk to you soon. Love you guys.